All right, so today we're going to start talking about matter and energy in the environment. So this is our ecology unit, and this will take us through to the end of the school year. So the first thing we're going to talk about is an ecosystem. So what is an ecosystem? An ecosystem is made of all the living and non-living things in an area. An ecosystem can be great big, like the size of an entire forest, or it can be small, like a single rotting log. So you have lots of different kinds of sizes that an ecosystem can be. Ecosystems have two parts. The first are the biotic factors. Biotic means living things. So bio, remember we've talked about that before, that bio means living. So biology is the study of life. So biotic factors are living things. The other parts of an ecosystem are called abiotic factors, and these are the non-living things. Abiotic factors and biotic factors depend on each other. So if one of them is disturbed, then all other parts of the ecosystem are affected. So you can think of it like this. If you've ever gone for a walk and you've kicked over a rock, and underneath the rock you've probably found things like worms and ants and beetles and maybe centipedes and millipedes and a bunch of things like that, right? Well, when you kick that rock over, now all of those things that were under that rock have to move, or they'll die, or they're disturbed. Something has to change. They have to change. All simply because you kick that rock over. So when you disturb one thing in an ecosystem, all the other parts of the ecosystem are affected, whether it's positive or negative. Okay, there are some abiotic factors in the ecosystem that we're going to talk about. Now, these abiotic factors are not the only abiotic factors that there are, but these are the ones that are found in all ecosystems. So the first one is the sun. And we've talked about the sun before, back in chapter 3, 4, somewhere in there, when we were talking about photosynthesis and cellular respiration. And back when we talked about that, we said that the sun was the source of almost all energy on Earth. We said that the sun provided energy either directly through the process of photosynthesis or indirectly. So by animals eating plants. So the plants use the sun directly, so they get their energy directly from the sun. Animals get their energy by eating plants or by eating things that eat plants. So you can get this energy from the sun either directly or indirectly. The second abiotic factor in an ecosystem is climate. So when we're talking about climate, we're talking about the average weather conditions in an area over time. Now, we're not talking about like today and tomorrow, what the weather is today and tomorrow, or even what the weather is last week and this week, or even really last year and this year. We're talking about over a longer period of time. So climate is affected by the sun. So the amount of sun and how direct those sun rays hit really has a huge effect on the climate. Climate includes things like temperature, moisture, so precipitation and humidity, and then wind is also part of climate. And all of these things have an influence on what can live in the area. So there are some things that can live in one climate but not in others. Think about polar bears. Polar bears are adapted to live in colder climates, right? So if you take a polar bear and you drop it into a rainforest climate, it's not going to survive because it doesn't have the adaptations that it needs to survive in that type of climate. So the climate is really important in deciding what can live in an area. The third abiotic factor also is part of that climate thing, but we're talking specifically just about the temperature. So how hot or how cold an area is. So this also is affected by the sun. So how much sunlight an area gets or how direct the sun rays are also. Temperature also decides what organisms can live in an area. Our fourth abiotic factor is water. All life on Earth requires water. If you think back how to what you know about cells and humans and organisms, what percent of humans is made of water? So everything I've ever read says somewhere between 70 and 75% of you is made of water. And that goes with most organisms. So think about it. We talked about the cell quite a bit at the beginning of the year. And when we talked about the cell, we talked about the watery, liquidy stuff inside of the cell, right? The cytoplasm. So the cytoplasm is made mostly of water. So your cells are made mostly of water. Since you are made of cells, you are made mostly of water. So it's really important for you to have that water. Our fifth abiotic factor is the atmosphere. So the atmosphere includes the layer of gases that surrounds Earth. The atmosphere is made mostly of nitrogen and oxygen, and it provides oxygen and carbon dioxide to living things and protects them from the sun's harmful rays. So we have this nice ozone layer that helps keep us protected. And finally, the last one is soil. Soil is made of rocks, minerals, water, air, and the remains of once living things. Most of the time, we don't ever stop and think about how soil is made of stuff. We just think, soil is soil. But it actually has these things. So it's made of rock, it's made of mineral, water, air, and the remains of once living things. Soil is an important thing because it provides a home to organisms like insects and bacteria and fungus and other things. The type of organisms that can live there is influenced by how much, the water content of the soil. So is it a sandy soil that drains real well, or is it a clay soil that holds a lot of water? What texture does it have? Is it a real thick, densely packed clay kind of soil? Is it a real loose, sandy soil? Is it a loam, which is in between? And then the amount of nutrients available in the soil is also has an influence on what kinds of things can live in that area. When we return nutrients to the soil, we usually do that through the breakdown of dead organisms. And we're going to be talking about that cycle of matter in the next chapter, or section of the chapter, I guess.